first time David saw someone else in the mirror, he thought it was a dream. It was late, well past midnight, and he'd gone down to the basement to grab a box of old books. The light bulb above him flickered as usual, casting long, restless shadows on the concrete floor. Against the far wall leaned an antique mirror, ornate and tall, wrapped in dust and silence. It had come with the house, left behind by his uncle who died just 3 months earlier. David had passed by the mirror a dozen times before without noticing anything unusual. But tonight, it showed something different. Not his reflection, not the cluttered basement behind him, but a softly lit living room. Elegant, warm, a couch, a flickering fireplace, a family photo on the mantel. He blinked, stepped back. The image remained. At first, he told himself it was just a trick of light. Maybe the mirror had a warped surface or some reflective illusion he hadn't noticed. He took a tentative step closer. The scene sharpened. A woman entered the frame, brushing her hair as she walked into the room. She was in her mid-30s, wearing a pale blue sweater and jeans. She didn't look up. Behind her, a man paced slowly, talking on the phone. Their movements were real, fluid, ordinary. David whispered, "What the hell?" As if in answer, the woman suddenly stopped. She turned toward the mirror, not toward the man behind her, not toward the room, but directly toward David. Her eyes locked onto his. She tilted her head, confused. Then her lips moved, forming a word. One word. His name. David stumbled back, knocking over a box. The image in the mirror shimmered and was gone, replaced by his own reflection again, pale and stunned, staring back at him. He didn't remember walking back upstairs. He barely remembered crawling into bed beside his wife's empty pillow. She was away visiting her sister. The house felt colder without her, quieter. He kept the light on that night. By morning, he had half convinced himself it was nothing. Exhaustion, a trick of the eyes, stress, maybe even a lingering fever. But when he went back down to the basement the next night, the mirror was waiting. Same scene, same woman. Only this time, the man behind her was standing still, facing the mirror, and smiling. David didn't go to work the next day. He couldn't. Every time he tried to pull himself away, his mind dragged him back to the basement, to the mirror, to that smile. It hadn't been friendly. There was something off about the way the man's lips curved, too wide, too still. His eyes didn't blink. He just stood there, grinning at David through the glass like he was staring at a long-lost friend, or a future victim. By noon, David was back in the basement, standing a safe distance from the mirror. Nothing unusual, just his own reflection now. The dusty boxes, the water-stained walls, everything normal, too normal. He took out his phone, hit record, and filmed the mirror for 5 straight minutes. Nothing happened, but when he reviewed the footage upstairs, his hands nearly dropped the phone. In the video, at exactly 3 minutes in, the fireplace in the mirror flickered to life. Then the woman appeared again. Then the man. But David hadn't seen any of that live. He ran back downstairs. The mirror was still, empty. The next night, he brought a dry erase marker. As soon as the scene appeared again, he drew a small X in the corner of the mirror. In the reflection, the X wasn't there. Different world, different space. The woman walked into view. She paused like before, then turned to the mirror. She looked more tired this time, more pale. Her eyes scanned the room behind her. Then slowly they locked on David's. She didn't look confused anymore. She looked afraid. Her lips moved again. Not his name this time. One word. One terrifying word. Help. David's breath caught in his throat. He stepped back, startled, and hit something behind him. He spun around. No one. But when he turned back to the mirror, the man in the background had moved closer. His smile was gone. Now his expression was blank. His eyes locked onto David's like a predator sizing up prey. David stumbled up the basement stairs and slammed the door behind him. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he emailed Jerome. Jerome was more than just an old college buddy. He was an expert in rare antiques, and the one person David trusted to tell him the truth. He showed up the next afternoon, tall and calm as ever, in a worn coat and scarf. "This mirror," David said, leading him to the basement. "It shows something else. Not just reflections. A whole life. A family." Jerome looked at the mirror for a long time without speaking. Then finally he said, "This isn't a regular antique, David. It's French. 18th century. Probably a psychomancer relic." "A what?" Jerome turned to him. "Some people used to believe that mirrors weren't just for seeing your reflection. They were for seeing across dimensions. Alternate lives. Possibilities. Doors." David swallowed hard. "And what happens if the people on the other side see you back?" Jerome didn't blink. "Then the door swings both ways." That night, David couldn't sit still. Jerome's words kept echoing in his head. The door swings both ways. He had replayed the footage from his phone at least a dozen times. The woman's face when she said, "Help," wasn't just frightened. It was desperate, like she knew time was running out. He waited until midnight. The house was still, silent. Then he crept down to the basement, flashlight in hand. The mirror was already active, glowing faintly in the darkness like it had its own pulse. The living room on the other side looked dimmer now, the fireplace cold. The woman was there again, sitting in an armchair, hands folded tightly, eyes fixed on the glass. David hesitated, then slowly raised a dry erase marker and wrote on the mirror's surface, "Who are you?" She jumped slightly at the motion. Then she stood, walked up to the glass, and mouthed something slowly. David squinted, trying to read her lips. "You're me." His stomach dropped. He erased the message and quickly wrote, "What do you mean?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached behind her, lifted a small mirror from the table, and held it up to her face. As soon as she looked into it, her reflection twisted, glitched. For a split second, David saw himself staring back from her mirror. Then, behind her, the man appeared again. He walked with robotic slowness, his arms stiff at his sides, his head tilted just slightly. He stopped behind her and whispered something. She nodded once. Then, without warning, she picked up a piece of paper and began writing furiously. The image on David's side shimmered. He backed away, frightened, and then he saw it. A crumpled piece of paper on the floor beside the furnace. He hadn't noticed it before. Heart racing, he picked it up and unfolded it. It was covered in symbols. Circles within circles. Lines that didn't seem human. But in the corner, there was one word written in English. "Run." David stared at it, breath shallow. He turned slowly to look at the mirror again. The woman was gone. The man was standing alone now. His face was blank. His mouth started moving. David leaned in, watching carefully. The man mouthed something too. 2 words this time. "You're next." A loud knock rattled the basement door. David leapt back, heart pounding. He stared up the stairs, waiting. Nothing. But when he turned back to the mirror, it was just his reflection again. The family was gone. The glow was gone. Only his pale, wide-eyed face stared back at him. Then the basement door creaked open on its own. David didn't move. The door at the top of the stairs was open, just slightly, enough for the hallway light to bleed into the darkness of the basement like a reluctant visitor. But there was no sound, no footsteps, no voices, nothing. He slowly backed away from the mirror, keeping his eyes on it like it might spring to life again. But it didn't. Just his reflection. Pale, terrified, alone. Until the reflection blinked, wrong. His real eyes hadn't closed. But in the mirror, they did. That was the moment David knew. Whatever was in that mirror wasn't just watching him anymore. It was copying him. He ran up the stairs, 2 at a time, and slammed the door shut behind him, twisting the lock hard. He leaned against the wood, heart hammering, struggling to breathe. The house felt foreign now, like the walls had shifted, like the air had changed. Even the ticking of the kitchen clock sounded slower. He called Jerome immediately. "You need to come back," David said, barely keeping his voice steady. "I think it's inside now." Jerome didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way." Within the hour, they were both in the living room, lights on, mirror dragged up from the basement and leaned against the wall. Jerome examined it closely with a flashlight and a strange black stone he kept in his coat pocket. "This mirror doesn't just show them," Jerome muttered. "It's mimicking, replacing. I've read about these soul-bound constructs. The old belief was that if a mirror could reflect something long enough, it could become it. And once the reflection is complete," he looked at David, "it crosses over." David shook his head. "But why me?" Jerome pulled a notebook from his bag and flipped to a page filled with scribbles and diagrams. "Your uncle wrote about this. He said the mirror responds strongest to unresolved identity. People who are fractured, lost. You've been struggling, haven't you? After your wife left." David looked away, jaw clenched. "She didn't leave. She died." Jerome lowered the notebook, his voice softening. "That kind of grief makes you vulnerable. The mirror doesn't just want to copy you. It wants to replace the part of you that still remembers pain." David stood and walked toward the mirror, his reflection moving just a second behind. He lifted his hand. The reflection mirrored him, but slower. Suddenly, the image changed. The mirror-world version of David smiled. Not a kind smile. A hollow one. Empty. Artificial. Then he waved. Jerome stepped beside him. "We need to sever the link before it finishes copying you." David turned to him. "How?" "There's a ritual. Dangerous. But it might work. It involves entering the mirror, confronting the reflection, and reclaiming what it took." David stared at the mirror. "You want me to go in?" "No," Jerome said. "I want you to be ready when it tries to come out." As if on cue, the mirror rippled like water disturbed by wind, and for a split second, David saw himself standing on the other side, but with no reflection at all on his side. His copy was now closer to real than him. Jerome didn't sleep that night. He stayed downstairs with David, eyes locked on the mirror, candlelight flickering across its surface like nervous shadows. The ritual needed specific timing, midnight, when the boundary between the two worlds was thinnest. David sat on the floor, exhausted, hollow-eyed, barely speaking. He felt disconnected from his body, like pieces of him had already started slipping away. Every time he blinked, he saw flashes. His mirror self standing in his kitchen, sitting on his couch, smiling at his reflection in places he hadn't visited. It was learning, rehearsing, replacing. At 11:59 p.m., Jerome stood and lit the final candle. "Once it starts, there's no going back," he said. "You step through. You find the reflection. You break the link not with violence but with truth. You have to show it what it's missing. Something only the real you can carry." David looked up. "And if I fail?" "Then it walks out," Jerome said. "And you stay behind." The clock hit midnight. The mirror shimmered, then opened. The glass melted into liquid, rippling outward. A soft wind blew from the surface, cold and metallic. David stepped forward. The room behind the mirror looked like his house, but off, colors inverted, shadows wrong, angles slightly twisted like a dream remembered incorrectly. He reached out. His fingers didn't meet glass. They passed through. He stepped in. Everything was silent. Time felt slow and heavy. David turned in circles. He was in his own living room, but everything was reversed. Even the photos on the wall stared at him with blank, blurred faces. He called out, his voice muffled like shouting underwater. Then he saw it himself. The reflection stood in the kitchen, head tilted, smiling gently. "You're not real," David said. The reflection mirrored his words. "You're not real." David stepped forward. "You're missing something." "So are you," the reflection said. "That's why you're here." "You're just a shell," David growled. "You don't feel. You don't grieve. You don't bleed." The reflection's smile faltered. "Grief is weight. I'm lighter without it." David's voice cracked. "But it's mine. She was mine." Suddenly, images flashed across the mirror walls. His wife's laugh, her voice, her final hospital bed. His mirror self flinched, face twisting, struggling to hold form. The house around them started shaking. "I remember her," David whispered. "You never will," the reflection screamed. Its voice distorted, warped, and lunged forward. David reached out not to fight but to touch. Their hands met. There was a flash of light, then silence. David gasped awake, lying on the floor in his own living room. Jerome knelt beside him, breathless. "You did it. You came back." The mirror was still now, cold, solid, just a reflection. But in the corner of the glass, a faint shadow remained, watching. The mirror was covered the next morning. Jerome wrapped it in layers of cloth, then locked it inside the old wooden chest from the attic. They didn't speak much while they worked. There wasn't much to say. David was alive. The house was quiet again. But something hung in the air between them, like an echo that hadn't fully faded. David didn't go back to the basement after that. Not even once. Instead, he began to repair his life, small, slow things. He called the university, took a leave of absence. He started going for walks again. He began sketching, something he hadn't done since college. At first, it was just random shapes, abstract expressions of something he couldn't quite name. But eventually, the drawings began to take form. Faces, rooms, empty hallways, and always mirrors. One afternoon, Jerome returned to check on him. "You look better," he said, setting down a bag of groceries. "I feel grounded," David replied. "Like I've been swimming for years and finally touched the bottom." Jerome smiled faintly. "It's never fully gone. You know that, right?" David nodded. "I know, but it's quiet now, and I think that's enough." They drank coffee in silence. Later that evening, David sat alone in his living room, flipping through a sketchbook when he noticed something strange. One of the drawings, an ink sketch of his basement mirror, had a faint mark in the corner. A handprint. He hadn't drawn it. The print was small, almost childlike. He stared at it for a long time, heart heavy but steady. He didn't panic. He didn't call Jerome. He closed the sketchbook, stood up, and walked over to the hallway mirror. His reflection stared back. Tired, yes, but real, complete. He looked himself in the eye and said softly, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." The lights flickered once, then settled. The house was still, and that was enough. "Now let me ask you something. If you found a mirror in your home that showed you someone else's life, and one day they looked back, would you turn away, or would you look deeper? Tell us in the comments below.